Hey guys, and welcome along to the first update to my Australian consumer drone guide. I released the original version of this video back in October 2021, and let me tell you, a fair bit of stuff has happened since then. If you're new here, then this video is designed to give you a good basic understanding of all aspects of the consumer drone scene here in Australia. I'll run you through the basics of owning and flying a drone, what sort of paperwork's required, which drones give you the best bang for your buck, and where and when is the best time to fly one. So if you've just got a drone or you've had one for a little while but are unsure about where and when you can legally fly it, then this video is for you. In this video, I'm going to cover buying and using a drone legally in Australia in 2022/2023, and I'm going to break it down into three parts: buying a drone, all that legal stuff, and flying it. And before we get into it, I would like to point out that rules and regulations do change and official timetables get updated, so please check for recent content on my channel the older this video gets. Remember also that I am not a lawyer and none of the following constitutes legal advice. You do you. When I was writing this guide last year, the biggest player in the consumer drone market by far was DJI, and guess what? They still are. All this despite running into some import-export issues that dented some of their international sales. In 2021, the US government put DJI on something called the Entity List, where they joined Chinese communications giant Huawei. This was a little bit awkward since 900 or so US public safety agencies, including the New York City Police Department, use DJI products. When it comes to secretly monitoring American citizens from the air, federal and state agencies swear by DJI products. The good news is that Australia will work with any company no matter how shite their country's civil rights record is, and there's no indication that sanctions will be placed on DJI by this country. Yay! So ubiquitous are DJI products that it comes as a surprise to some people that other brands are in fact available. Some of them are easier to get hold of in this country than others, but so expansive is the DJI range these days that it's getting harder and harder to find a reason to champion the little guy. This is a shame because the fact is that the closest DJI gets to actual competition, Skydio and Autel Robotics, produce excellent drones. Unfortunately, you can't buy Skydio's latest consumer drone here at all. Yes, you can buy Autel Robotics drones from specialist suppliers such as Rise Above and Camzilla here in New South Wales, Kingfisher Drones in Queensland, Integral Drones in South Australia, Drone Addiction in Victoria, and Drone Shop in Perth. And while I did find it on sale at good old JB Hi-Fi, the listed Evo 2 was on back order, which as we all know is sales jargon for we don't have this product and we probably never will. Oh, and while we're on the subject of alternatives to DJI, don't even think about getting one of those $100 4K drones you see listed on the old bargain shopping websites. They are total and complete garbage and will fly just once, out of your control and kamikaze style, straight into the path of a passing big double, which, due to the piss poor construction of said drone, won't even notice the impact. So when it comes to consumer drones here in Australia, the best brand in terms of availability, price, range and quality is DJI. End of. Since we last chatted, the size of consumer drones, like many different kinds of technology with the possible exception of Apple Watches, has continued to shrink. However, it's not just technical advances that are leading to ever smaller drones. It's also caused by the legalities of flying a drone here in Australia, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. Typically speaking, there are three physical sizes of consumer drones. At the top of the list, we have the large form factor drones such as the Phantom range. These drones do not fold, but their sturdy construction makes them suitable for harsh flying conditions. That large form factor has lost much of its consumer appeal in recent years, and it seems somewhat unlikely to me that DJI will ever release a new Phantom. These bulky drones have, I suspect, had their day. In the middle of the list are the large foldable drones such as the Mavic range from DJI and the Evo 2 from Autel Robotics. But the real growth and the focus of the global consumer drone industry is undoubtedly on the small and micro form factor drones such as the DJI Mini and the Evo Nano. It used to be the case, if you were at all serious about video quality, then you would avoid those small sub 250 gram drones because they usually had inferior sensors and cameras on them. However, with the release of the DJI Mini 3 Pro and its 10-bit camera, that is no longer the case, and there's a strong argument that unless you're a serious filmmaker, something like the Mini 3 Pro should be the beginning and end of your search. So then we come to recommendations for a specific model of drone. And while there's no single good choice for all people that meets all use cases, if you want a quick answer, then the drone that sits in the current sweet spot of features, price and quality is the aforementioned DJI Mini 3 Pro. Before you buy a drone, you need to carefully and honestly consider what you're actually going to be using it for. And to help you along, I've created a list of recommendations based on some broad use cases. If you're a travel vlogger slash blogger, or looking to become a travel vlogger slash blogger, then the DJI Mini 3 Pro is your best choice. It's small, capable and dodges most of the legal restrictions based on larger drones. If you're a filmmaker for whom video quality is paramount, then the Mavic 3 Cine is obviously your best choice. This has far and away the best camera and sensor of any consumer drone. If you're a hobbyist photographer, then the DJI Mini 3 Pro is your best option. If you're a serious hobbyist or semi-professional or indeed professional, then the Mavic 3 Cine with its Hasselblad camera and incredible dynamic range is your best bet. If you're someone who just likes the idea of a drone and you're not especially bothered by video or photo quality and you're prepared to only fly at model aircraft clubs or indoors, then the DJI Avata is your best option. The Avata is as much about the flying of the drone as the imagery you produce on it. If you fancy earning a few extra bucks doing something like real estate photography, then either the Mavic Air 2S or the Mavic 3 Cine are your best options. As long as you stick with one of the well-known manufacturers, it's surprisingly hard to buy a bad drone, so don't stress too much about it. DJI have been in this game for decades now, and along the way they've worked out most of the wrinkles when it comes to making a fully featured and reliable consumer quadcopter. After dipping a toe in the water and getting their legs bitten off by a shark, both GoPro and Sony have abandoned the drone market, so it's pretty much DJI and to a lesser extent Autel Robotics world. The most important accessory you can get for any drone is an extra battery or two, and perhaps a fast charger for them. This gives you more airtime within which to enjoy flying the drone or taking photos or videos. I also bought a charger for my car which runs off the old 12-volt socket, and it's great for charging batteries on the go when you're moving between locations. Purchase a decent set of ND filters from someone like PolarPro. ND filters can be used on bright sunny days to keep the frame rate low, and enable you to have that cinematic film look. Get yourself a little collapsible landing pad. They take up very little space and are a great way of stopping your drone from ingesting detritus from the ground. The advanced controllers such as DJI Smart Controller are well worth getting, since they make setup and takedown much faster and mean you don't lose access to your smartphone while you're flying your drone. An insurance policy such as DJI's Care Refresh is a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. It's all too easy to badly damage, completely destroy or lose your drone, and having Care Refresh gives you the peace of mind to fly confidently and not stress about dropping several grand's worth of kit in an inaccessible canyon. There's no great advantage in buying your drone direct from the manufacturer, although most people do, so simply find the best deal going at the time. There are a number of specialist drone retailers, several based in each state. I mentioned a few of them earlier, and there's a strong argument for buying from them because you get local support and someone in Australia to deal with if there are any problems. You can still buy DJI Care Refresh insurance if you purchase from an independent store. Just remember to buy it before you activate that drone for the first time. In the past, I've advised against buying a second-hand drone because crash and water damage is easily concealed. So tread carefully if you've never owned a drone before and don't know what to look for. If you are buying a second-hand drone, then you should pay close attention to the batteries. Give them a good inspection and make sure there's no bloating at all by checking that flat underside. If the batteries are bad, the drone might still be good, but the replacement cost should factor into the price you pay. It's easy to get blasé about a drone and to simply send it without taking any safety precautions. But the fact is that things can and do go wrong, and a quick inspection can save a cardiac arrest and several grand. Here are the basic checks I recommend pre-flight. 1. Check the props are correctly secured to the drone. They can become loose over time, or if the drone has had any kind of a collision, even with just grass. 2. Check that the battery is securely clipped into the drone. If it is getting harder to clip in over time, then that means the battery is bloating and should be replaced. 3. Check the compass. If you're advised to recalibrate it by the app, then do so. It takes a couple of seconds and can reduce the possibility of a flyaway. 4. Check you got enough battery power to complete your intended flight, and remember the battery usage will be much higher in strong winds. Also remember to check the battery on both the drone and the controller. 5. Check your GPS reception. Unless you've got solid lock on those GPS satellites, you risk a flyaway. 6. Check your return to home height. Ensure that it's high enough to get over whatever obstacles like large trees are nearby. When it comes to actually flying your drone, remember to take baby steps. Fly in beginner's mode at first until you understand those controls. Learn to fly your drone by the sticks while looking at your drone and without relying on that live feed, and then you'll be able to fly much more confidently. Remember also that all drones have return to home functions, and these should be used if you are concerned about getting it back safely, but try not to rely too heavily on the automated modes. Drones have always been subject to the rules of aviation here in Australia. However, over the last few years, the legal requirements have changed quite substantially, and there are now rules and fees imposed on drone users that did not exist before. Like most aspects of life in Australia, the various layers of government are always looking for new and interesting ways of depriving you of your money, and drones are no exception. It's not all bad news though, there are some workarounds. Of course, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from not indulging the government with its tax and registration schemes. Will the feds kick down your door, shoot your dog and ship you off to a secure offshore detention facility to be waterboarded if you decide to opt out? Probably not. Are there repercussions if you do opt out and get caught? Yes. You're unlikely to get a custodial sentence, but they can impose substantial fines. Ultimately, it's like dodging any legal requirement. You might live a carefree life and never have any dramas, or your luck might run out and they decide to make an example out of you. If you are planning on doing anything even remotely commercial with your drone, then you don't really have an option, because most businesses will expect proof of legality. Control of the airspace over a country is typically administered by two organisations. The first is the military, and the second is a department of the government who look after all the non-military aircraft. Here in Australia, that organisation is the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, or CASA for short. These guys used to purely concern themselves with actual aircraft like passenger jets, light aircraft and helicopters, but now they're in charge of drones too, and it's fair to say that they probably wish they weren't. Drones represent a unique problem for CASA, because while all other aircraft are flown by people who have a vested interest in doing things the right way, many drone users couldn't care less about all that and just want to have a bit of fun. So CASA has had to adapt to a changing world, and now they are charged with managing the registration and taxation of consumer drones. Alright, let's talk about the official rules and regulations. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to split this into two parts: recreational drone users and commercial drone users. The partially good news about recreational drone use is that when I made last year's video, CASA were on the verge of implementing mandatory registration for both operator and drone, effective supposedly then from May 2022, but they've now pushed back that date a whole year. Don't shoot the messenger. If you check the CASA website now, you'll see references to a date of mid-2023. The vagueness of that official mid-2023 date hardly instills confidence in their proclamations. I mean, if it's the end of June 2023, why not say so? So as it stands, if you're flying your drone for fun and not earning any money from selling photos or videos, you're off the hook until next year. Yay! And if you want to avoid having to get official accreditation for yourself, and also to dodge any drone registration requirements after mid-2023, then the best way to future-proof yourself is to get a sub 250 gram drone like the Mini 3 Pro. But any drone in that sub 250 gram class will do, and it will not need to be registered, and the person operating it will not need any official accreditation if they're using it for purely recreational purposes. And there are other benefits to using a sub 250 gram drone as well, some of which I'll get into shortly. If you own a drone that's outside that sub 250 gram class, such as a Mavic Air or Mavic 3, then you'll need to register yourself and your drone from mid-2023 onwards. But unless CASA change the rules again before then, you won't have to pay any drone tax so long as you're only flying recreationally. Alright, so let's talk commercial drone use, and to begin we should clarify what commercial drone use actually is. Basically, any flying you do that nets you some kind of income is deemed to be commercial use. So, for instance, if you have a monetized YouTube channel and you use your drone to shoot footage for that channel, then you are a commercial drone flyer. CASA's definition of commercial use extends all the way from obviously commercial work, such as aerial surveying, all the way through to photographers selling prints. If you are flying commercially and you want to be legit, then there are 3 different bits of paperwork you'll need to complete. And by paperwork, I mean online forms, of course. Firstly, you'll need an aviation reference number, better known as an ARN, which can be acquired from the My CASA portal, which I'll link down below. Once you have your ARN, you can log back into your My CASA account and click on the RPA Operator Accreditation box. You will now need to complete a short test based on the standard operating conditions. The standard operating conditions are the basic drone rules that have been in place for many years now, such as going no higher than 120 meters and not flying your drone through your neighbor's window. In any case, it's probably an idea to familiarize yourself with the rules before sitting the test. Most of it's basic common sense stuff and no advanced knowledge of the laws of aerodynamics is involved, but go in well armed beforehand and you'll sail straight through it. Once you've done your test and got your operator accreditation, the third and final part of this bureaucratic jigsaw puzzle is to register your drone. If your drone weighs more than 500 grams, you'll have to pay $40 a year to keep it registered. Under 500 grams, and you'll still have to register it, but there's no tax to pay. I am sometimes asked if it's worth jumping through all these legal hoops imposed by the government. Are you going to get a knock on the door from the man from CASA because you earn a few bucks a month from your YouTube channel? And honestly, it seems highly unlikely unless some lovely person dobs you in. But I, of course, in no way condone skipping the paperwork and encourage you all to fulfill your legal responsibilities. I do commercial work for local councils and they check on the legality of any photographs or videos I supply, so I'm fully registered and paid up. I'd rather I didn't have to jump through all these hoops, but it is what it is. I often get asked whether or not an international tourist has to abide by all these drone rules and regulations, and the answer is that yes, of course they do. At the end of the day, the drone rules are no different to any other law in this country, and just as you have to abide by the speed limits on the roads, so you have to abide by Part 101 of the Australian Civil Aviation Safety Regulations. Alright, so you've done your due diligence. If you're flying commercially, you've completed all those bloody online forms, you've done the test, and got all that paperwork in order. You can now chuff off and fly your drone wherever you goddamn please, right? What do you think? As a drone owner, you are legally required to observe the standard operating conditions. These have been in place for many years and have not changed substantially during that period. But there are some gotchas in there, particularly if you're in FPV drones. Part 101 of the Civil Aviation Safety Regulations is a long and extremely tedious legal document, so I'm just going to pour out 5 important things that you should be aware of if you want to fly to the letter of the law. Firstly, you must fly your drone in visual line of sight. That means you're supposed to be able to see your drone with your own eyes at all times. So, if you send your drone up in the air and then fix your eyes on your smartphone screen showing the live feed and proceed to send that drone a few kilometers away using only that screen to navigate it, that is illegal. It also means you can't fly the drone behind some obstacle such as a building or in fog or smoke. How would the authorities prove that you flew beyond visual line of sight unless they witnessed you doing it in person and without any metadata stored in the videos or photographs? That's an interesting question, isn't it? This particular regulation also means that it is unfortunately illegal to fly an FPV drone such as the DJI Avata as you would a regular drone out in the great outdoors. Unlike other countries where it's perfectly legal to fly FPV if you have a spotter with you, there is no such get out clause here in Australia. So if you were seduced by the DJI marketing machine and ponied up for an Avata here in Australia, the only place you can legally fly it outdoors is at an official aircraft club. And yes, you could of course just ignore the regulations and fly your FPV drone outdoors. If you were never going to share any video footage, you'd probably be fine. If you planned on sharing to YouTube or TikTok or whatever, and bear in mind that it's really obvious that you're flying FPV. It looks totally different to regular drone footage and it's therefore quite easy to spot. Secondly, you're only supposed to fly during the day. Sounds pretty simple, right? But what is the official definition of day? Can you legally fly at sunrise and sunset, for instance? Here's the actual text from CASA's Visual Flight Rules regulations. Night is that period between the end of evening civil twilight and the beginning of the morning civil twilight. For all intents and purposes, first light could be construed as the beginning of civil twilight and last light as the end of civil twilight. And if that sounds like some bloody awful riddle, allow me to translate. It means you can legally put your drone in the air before sunrise and fly it after sunset. The actual timing will of course change over the course of the year though, but if we take today, the day I'm filming this by way of an example, morning civil twilight begins at 6:05 AM and sunrise is at 6:31 AM. So I've got about 20 minutes before sunrise when I can legally fly my drone. And if we look at this evening, then sunset's at 7:01 PM, but civil twilight doesn't end until 7:26 PM. So again, I can legally fly my drone for about 25 minutes after sunset. If it's a cloudy day and there's no sunset colour, this means it's just about possible to shoot urban night scenes and still be completely legal. And if you want to know when things like civil twilight is, then I use the Lumi app on my iPhone, and the SunCalc Plus app on Android does the same thing. Thirdly, you're required to fly no higher than 120 meters. However, that rule is 120 meters AGL, above ground level, not sea level. So if you're up a 500 meter mountain, for instance, you can still legally fly your drone 620 meters above sea level. However, you should bear in mind that buildings don't count, so you can't fly your drone above the Sydney Sky Tower and claim you were keeping to the height restrictions. If you are using a drone that weighs more than 250 grams, then you are not allowed to fly closer than 5.5 kilometers from a controlled airport. The rule talks about controlled airports, which are usually the ones with control towers. Those little grass strip airfields are usually not controlled airports, and you are allowed to fly within that 5.5 kilometer radius if there are no aircraft in the area, and so long as you stay outside the airfield boundaries. However, sub 250 gram drones like the old DJI Mini 3 Pro can fly within the 5.5 kilometer radius of controlled airports, though obviously not within the airfield boundaries. This is another one of those good reasons I mentioned earlier about why sub 250 gram drones are a solid purchasing option in 2022/2023. While the laws do vary around Australia, you can photograph or film people in public, and you can photograph or film them on their own property with your drone. You should of course respect people's privacy and not go filming naked people in their backyards, you dirty bastard. But if someone gets in your face and tells you it's illegal to photograph them, particularly when they are in public, then they are wrong. Even in WA, where the Surveillance Devices Act of 1998 prohibits the use of optical surveillance devices by a person to monitor or record someone engaged in private activity, they still make an exception for accidental photography, so don't go stressing about it. There are regulations and laws prohibiting the use of drones near marine mammals. And if you'd like to know more about this, check out my video on this subject, which I will link up here. You're not supposed to get within 100 meters of a marine mammal, such as a whale or a dolphin, but research has shown they are highly unlikely to be bothered by a drone. And so if one appears on the surface near where you're filming, be sure to video it as you move your drone away. All that being said, I see more and more photos and videos shot by drone users who are obviously directly above whales and dolphins. And these drone pilots seem to be able to shoot this video with impunity. So maybe the authorities don't give a shit anymore and we should all stop worrying about it. As with everything else when it comes to wildlife, simply try not to be a tool. For instance, during the springtime, birds get highly territorial, and everyone takes exception to your drone, then let it have the airspace and you go fly somewhere else. The first thing to understand about airspace is that once a drone is in the air, even if it's an inch off the ground, it falls under the control of Air Services Australia and not whoever owns the land. This, my friends, is important. So while an organisation such as Parks Victoria might have a ludicrously overzealous blanket ban on drones in all state parks, national parks and reserves across the entire state, as they do, that only prohibits you from taking off and landing on their land. Parks Victoria do not control the airspace above the park, and there is nothing stopping you from taking off on public land nearby and then flying over that park. This rule applies to literally everywhere in Australia. Airspace is controlled by Air Service Australia, not the owner of the land, and all the no drone signs in the world won't change that. My usual guidance about not being a tit still applies, but know your rights. Drone use is also either banned outright or subject to a timetable of closures in certain areas, and this is known as restricted airspace. An example of an area where recreational drone use is banned outright is pretty much all of Sydney Harbour. You can apply to fly there, and professional media organisations regularly do, but you're unlikely to get permission if you just want to film the Opera House for your TikTok. Far and away the best way of seeing if a particular location is in restricted airspace is to look at the ok2fly.com.au website. I'll link it down there. Not only does it show where the restricted airspace zones are, but it shows you if they're active. As I mentioned, some airspace is permanently restricted, but some zones operate on a timetable. An example of this is where I live in South Coast, New South Wales. Here we have a large area of restricted airspace that covers most of the Shoalhaven LGA and is centred on the military airfield in Nowra. This cramps my style somewhat and means I can't fly my drone whenever I want. It's really annoying, but fortunately the airspace is not active 24/7. Typically speaking, it's not active at weekends and typically doesn't become active before about 10 in the morning. So I can legally fly early mornings and at weekends. So to see if your location is legal, just check OK to fly and you'll see instantly if you're good to go. Today's drones are extremely capable and can fly well in most conditions except for very heavy rain. If you get caught out and it does start to rain, bring the drone back as the motors don't do so well with water. Let it dry up fully before flying it again, and remember to run the motors up and let them run for a few minutes before trusting your drone to the sky. When it comes to wind, you'd be surprised just how much your drone can handle. Anything short of very strong to gale force winds are probably going to be fine. But remember, the drone uses more battery power when fighting the wind. And if you have to bring the drone home in strong wind, you may struggle to make it back before the battery is depleted. I tend to keep my drones on the ground in anything over about 30 km/h winds, which is well inside the recommended maximum for my drone of 40 kph. But I did get caught out one day and flew it in 50 km/h winds and it coped amazingly well. So have confidence in your drone, but don't expect it to survive a tornado. Your drone may also suffer from heat, and this is worth bearing in mind if flying during the summer months here in Australia, or at least that used to be the case. An overheated drone is a dead drone, so be mindful of temperatures and perhaps fly early or late in the day when those temperatures are lower. Check your drone manual for the maximum rated temperatures. On my Mavic 2 Pro it's 40 degrees centigrade. Do not try and recharge a hot battery because you can damage it that way. Let it cool down fully first. You'll also pick up a fair amount of bug jam during the summer months, so remember to give your drone's camera lens a good clean and also the rest of the drone when you get home. And that brings us to the end of this updated 2022-2023 guide. If you want to be certain of any of the information I've just explained, it's a good idea to double check it on the official websites, because the situation and legalities may have changed since I made it. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the old like button down there and consider subscribing to my channel to see more of my content in your YouTube feed. Till the next time guys, ta-ta.